Okay. Okay. So this is for BFJN. I probably should have shared this with the panelists. Some of you might know this is part of our series, Uncomfortable Conversations, and it's the first one of the season. We have been working to bring people together around this idea that we should have conversations that make us uncomfortable, not intentionally uncomfortable, but these topics that sometimes we avoid because they make us uncomfortable, but about important issues, because as Christians, we're called to engage with issues of justice, generosity, and simplicity, which at the Boston Faith and Justice Network is our call to help Christians live simply, give generously in order to pursue a just world. And that's what we're all about. So this amazing panel that has come together tonight and graciously offered their time is going to talk to us about trafficking and slavery. We have with us Stephanie from RouteOne Ministry, the acting interim executive director. We have Beth from the International Justice Mission, and Jasmine from Jasmine Grace Ministries. And I am Elizabeth, which I often forget to tell everyone, the executive director of BFJN. So thank you. First of all, I just want to give a sincere thanks to you guys, not just for generously giving up your time tonight, which I sincerely do appreciate, but for the work that you're doing. Each one of your organizations is doing really important work here in the area, in the country, and in the world. And so I'm just grateful that you're doing that work. So thank you. And now I'm going to hopefully talk much less than I have in the last 2 minutes over the course of the next hour, and invite you guys to share your experiences, your passions, your knowledge, and your expertise with our community. And so let me first invite you guys to, just have my person on Facebook telling me this is or is not going well. We got the thumbs up. I'm going to invite each of you just to introduce yourselves and tell us, who you are, what you do, and what brought you here tonight, other than my hopefully very gracious ask. And so Beth, I'm going to invite you to go first.
Hi, everybody. My name is Beth Hayden, and I am the Director of Partner Engagement for International Justice Mission. And I work with our partners, our donors, primarily in the New England area. And I am delighted to be asked to come in and talk about uncomfortable conversations. A lot of the work that we do is incredibly uncomfortable, but it just, as Elizabeth was saying, we really are called into justice work as Christians. So delighted to be here. Thank you.
And thank you. Stephanie?
Hi, yep, my name is Steph. I'm the acting interim director for RouteOne Ministry. We try to serve women sexually exploited on a very local and domestic level by entering into their lives and building relationships with them. We also have more recently developed community engagement, education, and awareness raising part of our mission, in that we do local trainings with pastors and other community leaders on topics ranging from what's a healthier sexual theology to trafficking 101. What does it look like? What's happening in your area and what can you do about it?
Thank you. And Jasmine?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jasmine Grace. I know on the screen it says Marino, that's the name I go by. I made a name for the outreach and the public speaking work that I do. The name of the ministry is Jasmine Grace Outreach. We serve women who have been commercially sexually exploited, trafficked, prostituted, whatever you want to call it, all wrapped up in one lovely package. Unfortunately, very closely linked with substance abuse. So we help women who have that link between addiction and the commercial sex trade, homelessness. We outreach to them by giving them bags that are filled with toiletries that are donated by the community. I guess I'm the founder and director of that ministry, if I haven't mentioned that. Do a lot of public speaking to raise awareness by sharing my testimony. We have about 4 survivors on our team that do the work as well, do a lot of public speaking, mentoring. We run groups in halfway houses, been to jails, anywhere we find vulnerable women that we want to serve. We want to help them self-identify and then start the healing process, walk alongside them, disciple them, help them in their early stages of recovery. And I'm also the author of a book. It's called The Diary of Jasmine Grace, Trafficked, Recovered, Redeemed. And that's available on Amazon. And I'm also the mother of 5 kids. I'm a homeschool mom, and I have a very full house at the moment. So I will often be muting myself because you never know what's going to happen.
I love it. Thank you. Okay, so now I'm gonna dive in with some questions, and Beth, I'm gonna start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about International Justice Mission, why it exists, and maybe help us understand how you as an organization connect your work with the Christian faith?
Thank you. So our mission simply is to protect people in poverty from everyday violence. And we do that by the work of transforming justice systems. We work in 24 field offices right now in 14 different countries. We are expanding, but these are countries that there is a high prevalence of slavery and trafficking. India, as an example, is one of those. Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, a number of places like that. In fact, we just opened up an office in Romania because of Romania being a hub for trafficking into Europe. So we are involved there as well. We are a group of professional people dedicated to excellence, but a faith community that are all united by our mandate to help the poor, the widows, and the orphans. We have a wonderful Christian rhythm. Every day we meet for prayer. We stop everything. We meet for prayer for a half an hour by Zoom, and pray for the work that we're involved with. It could be anything from an upcoming investigation, survivor story, whatever, but we come to prayer every day. And all of our work, all of our staff are Christian, and the work that we do could not happen unless we were grounded in that faith and relying on the work of Christ.
Thank you. Can you share some stories about rescues or like specific work that will maybe like model for us how IJM works? Because it's a very unique way that you guys do what you do.
Yes, it is. So there are a number of organizations internationally that bring clean water, that build schools, that bring medical support and supplies and so forth. All of those are really great. But if a little girl is attacked on the way to school, the new school that was built, and there's no protection for her, no impunity for the perpetrator, then she can't enjoy those things. And so our organization was founded by Gary Haugen. He was the lead investigator in the Rwanda genocide, and that was at the time, he wrote a book called The Locust Effect, which he kind of chronicles all of that story. But at the time, he realized that the everyday violence that the poor are suffering are keeping them in poverty. And it was really, that was the genesis of IJM and its real focus to transform justice systems so that the countries and the communities could advocate and protect their own citizens. So that's really at the heart of it. One of the hardest things that we've really had to pivot towards and really escalate our work is in the online sexual exploitation of children. The internet traffic in one country alone, and I'm just going to really focus on one country tonight, but the internet traffic in 2020 alone tripled for a variety of reasons. It is one of the hot spots of this crime simply because of things like high-speed internet, which is available, and because of international transactions that can be easily done on social platforms or in banking. They speak English, which is a big deal. And you bring all those factors together, and then there's also economic pressures. Unfortunately, in online exploitation of children, 90% of them are trafficked by either a parent or a family member. That is the primary group, and that's a really hard statistic to think through. I've seen pictures of survivors that have been rescued as young as 10 months. It's heartbreaking. It's unbelievable that this can happen and so forth. We've had arrests recently. There was a gentleman in Australia, and this is an incredibly complex crime, as you might imagine. But he was arrested in Australia after a very thorough search and investigation, and under him were multiple traffickers, and under them were multiple children. So we work with our own FBI, with Interpol. We work with government agencies. We work with NGOs that are in country, particularly for aftercare. Survivors of these types of crimes, it's a very specific trauma-informed therapy that we offer. And it's very specific to this crime. So we really have had to pivot a lot of our work towards that. That always comes down to the story of one that really can kind of embody, kind of what we see and how difficult this is. And there's a young woman named Cassie. She's 17 now, but she was trafficked at the age of 12, unknown to her parents. So this is a little bit of a different situation, but unknown to her parents. She was the youngest of 12 children. The family landed on very hard economic times. Somebody connected to the family offered to bring her to Manila in the Philippines from a smaller village. Kind of what you might imagine, this typical story, promising one thing and then something else completely else happening, and that's what happened to her. So she was trafficked by this gentleman in his own home. This is where she lived. And she was there for 5 years before IJM investigators were able to come in and rescue not just her, but the other children that were there. So the positive part of this story is that she was able to go successfully through the aftercare program, successfully able to be restored to her family that didn't know what had happened to her, and begin a new life. And not only that, but she gained the strength to testify against her perpetrator, who was then later arrested and convicted of the crimes. These stories of one are multiplied hundreds of thousands of times, unfortunately. So our role is to train and work with the justice systems in the countries that we work in, to be able to train them on how to understand, how to investigate, how to bring in the victims so that they can testify, how to work with them, how to work with social workers, how to transition them from the aftercare program into a more stable living situation so that they can go through the counseling, which is typically a 2-year period of time, but also to train lawyers and judges about how to best investigate and prosecute these cases, and to create political will. And that comes with advocacy of the people that are in the communities. And the survivors, many of them have come together in support groups, and they are the strongest advocate voices in those individual countries. And so that's a really exciting development that's happened in particularly in the last couple of years, just the rise of these survivors to have very strong voices of advocacy into their communities and governments.
Thank you so much for sharing. I mean, the stories and the powerful, those are always so powerful, but just also the model, the way in which IJM works is, I just think, such an effective way to do that, and just to have you walk us through it. I just really appreciate the way that you did that. So thank you. That's a lot of hard things to hear. But again, it's that uncomfortable thing. We can't turn away because things are difficult, right? Because we have to sort of sit, and not everyone can, this isn't everyone's work, obviously, but sitting with that and understanding and kind of seeing where we're called to engage with that work. So I really appreciate you sharing. Thank you. Stephanie, I want to ask you some things about RouteOne, will you tell us what is RouteOne's mission? Because I mean, like all of your organizations, you engage with this work in a unique way. So will you talk a little bit about that and about what your mission is?
Yeah. Like I mentioned before, our mission is to serve women sexually exploited and through relationship. We specifically do that by sending teams of women into strip clubs and meeting with the women inside. We bring cute, fun little gifts and hand them out with no strings attached. We don't put Bible verses on them. We don't carry in tracts to evangelize, and we just sit in the clubs and are there to speak with the women if they want to talk. And at first there's always skepticism, but eventually everybody wants to talk. And from there we just develop relationships, and we have been to these women's, the birthday parties of their son. We've gotten our hair cut with them. We've met them for coffee. And the reason that we do that and that's our main direct ministry is because almost every survivor whose story we've heard and almost every woman who has exited the commercial sex industry has said that the number one thing that helped them exit was just a trusting relationship. So we are primarily a relational ministry, and we want to be that trusting relationship, that one reliable person for the vulnerable person whose world is completely chaotic and topsy-turvy and who has nobody they can trust. And even the traditional figures like Beth mentioned, internationally, people's number one most likely trafficker is a parent or a relative. That's very much true here domestically as well. So people who are in these women's lives who are supposed to be trustworthy and reliable are actually their abusers and exploiters. So we want to be that relationship for them because they're not getting it from anywhere else.
Thank you for that. And you might have said this a little bit, and I feel like it's implicitly there, but just to bring this out and make it a little bit more explicit, can you tell us why you're at strip clubs? Because I think some people from the outside are like, a strip club's a strip club, like what's going on there? So maybe just unpack that a little bit for us.
Right. Yeah, no, thanks for that question, actually, because I think that it highlights a really big misconception that we have about trafficking in general. And we have this image of human trafficking as a woman who doesn't speak any English, who's been whisked away on some freighter ship and brought to this country and is chained to a radiator in the basement and is has physical abuse inflicted upon her to force her to exchange sex. And that does happen. But I think that trafficking, like Beth mentioned, is a very complex, multi-layered issue that happens in a lot of ways and does happen on a domestic, local level. And I also think that physical abuse isn't the only tool that exploiters use to get vulnerable people to do what they want. Oftentimes, the majority of our women who we encounter are being sold by their boyfriend or by someone who says they love them and is using that emotional manipulation to get women to sell themselves. So why are we in strip clubs? Because women are trafficked through strip clubs, and because it's a major avenue. If the woman in the strip club isn't actively being exploited, strip clubs are a major avenue. Pimps go there and look for new recruits, or they go there and bring a woman who they have newly recruited and get her to dance because it's a method of grooming that woman for further sexual exploitation and abuse. So we're in strip clubs because it's a major avenue for trafficking. And we're also in strip clubs because we believe that commercial sexual exploitation, both the legal and the illegal avenues of it, you know, pornography is legal, strip clubs are legal. But then we say prostitution in some cases and trafficking are illegal. But all of those avenues and methods of exploitation really are intertwine and get connected. And it's not a simple enough issue to just disentwine them and say that they're not related and make a clear cut, clean and dry separation between them. So I think we have to recognize that and just reorient our understanding of what trafficking and what exploitation are. Because at the end of the day, even if she's just stripping and that woman does not get commercially sexually exploited further than that, I still believe that no little girl says to herself, when I grow up, I want to be a stripper. When I grow up, I want to sell my body for money. I think we're human beings created in the image of God who want to do things that reflect that, who want to exercise our giftings and in a dignified way. So we also meet with women in strip clubs because we think that stripping is ultimately just a violation of that image of God. And we want to help these women realize their full dignity as image bearers.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that. That really painted a clear picture, I think, for anyone who's like this, you know, what is going on here? Like, why it could seem like this is a strange little like niche, like this, you know, why are we doing this here? But that really paints like that clear picture of like, we see this as such an important ministry because of all of these reasons going on here. And the way that you ended that with like this, oh, that's just such a powerful image of like, we are all image bearers and like, we want to protect the dignity of all of us, and that your work so clearly is aimed at that and is doing that. So thank you. That's a really helpful way to walk us through that. I appreciate that. I do want to ask you too about kind of that new avenue that you described about the work you're doing in educating in churches and some of that stuff. You like piqued my interest there, but I want to ask Jasmine a couple of questions too. So we'll follow up probably in the more general questions, because I think probably all of you have some educational pieces in the work that you do as well. So maybe we can generally talk about that. So Jasmine, I wanted to ask you if you would share some of your own story with us, because I know that's, I mean, it's obviously a very powerful story, very personal, and also very connected to the work that you do. So just want to ask you to share some of that with us.
Yeah, sure. I guess I forgot to mention maybe in my intro that I am a survivor of sex trafficking, and I've been out of the life 14 years or so, been clean and sober. Had to do that first as a way to actually heal. That's the only way it's possible. I didn't even know I was a survivor for the first 5 years of recovery either. So that's a process. And because of so many people's advocacy and awareness and education, we're noticing women coming into treatment earlier. You know, they're actually talking to their case managers, they're talking to their therapists, and they're saying, I'm a survivor. You know, I've been victimized. I was in the commercial sex trade. You know, they're no longer, well, I mean, I don't want to say all of them. I don't know the majority of it, but like, recently I've heard these women, you know, going in and actually saying that I'm a survivor. I need help. Do you have any organizations that can help me? I need someone else to talk to that knows what I've been through. So it's pretty amazing that a lot of the groundwork has been, you know, happening over the past, I'd say 20, 30 years. You know, we've come a long way in making sex trafficking known and labor trafficking. And people are aware. So much of the general public knows this information. It's good. So all of that influences the work that I do, because I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't a survivor, clearly. So for me, a lot of what Beth had mentioned about being groomed and how the survivor leadership is so important, I can totally agree with. But no one has mentioned the early childhood trauma or the vulnerabilities that these people go through. And again, speaking from my own perspective of being a female and growing up in a home with two parents that are still married to this day, but a lot of dysfunction, a lot of chaos. I was not sexually abused as a kid, but research says, prostitution research says that 80 to 90% of women who end up in the commercial sex trade are sexually abused as children. And so that dial's already been turned, right? So if you're being sexually abused young age, if your mother's a drug addict and she's exchanging you for drugs to the drug dealer or whoever, or there's an uncle or whoever it is that's abusing you, maybe you even start to run away. And now you might be in the foster care system. So we think about all these vulnerabilities and all these risk factors. But when you're 12, 13, which is the average age into the commercial sex trade, between 12 and 14, and a pimp or a trafficker comes along and offers you what was so freely taken is now going to get paid for, that seems like an upgrade. Right. And so you're easily tricked, you're manipulated. Obviously, you're young. You just want someone to love you and provide and take care of you. And that's what they promise. And that's exactly what my trafficker promised me. Like Steph said, I never dreamt of becoming a prostitute as a kid. I wanted to be a teacher, a veterinarian. I love to dance. I went to, dance school till I was probably 15 years old. I went to vocational high school to become a hairdresser. And so at 18, 19, I'm graduated. I'm working in a hair salon, going to community college. To be a journalist, I thought I'd like move to New York City and write for a fashion magazine and work in a fancy hair salon. I had dreams and goals like any young girl, but I had a lot of shame. I did experience sexual violence as a teen and I didn't process that. I just, stuffed it. I drank and drugged and hung out with all the wrong people. Older boys, started to do things I shouldn't have been doing. And I was just on that path of vulnerability and was very naive. Actually had an abortion at 18 years old. I was in a relationship with a guy who was a little bit older than me, and I got pregnant and he already had 2 or 3 kids. And so he really coerced me and talked me into getting an abortion, told me, oh, you're not ready to be a mom. You can't, you party all the time. So that's another really big thing that uncomfortable that people don't generally talk about is abortion and how this plays a giant role in this problem as well. And so here I was just, again, very broken, very young, and at 19 years old, and I was at a local nightclub and I met a guy who would later become my trafficker. And over a short period of time, maybe 3 to 6 months, he really groomed me, manipulated me. Something else that Steph said brought this to mind, that a lot of times it looks like domestic violence, right? This type of grooming. And these types of traffickers that really use that boyfriend way of manipulation really get in there and they mess with your emotions and you think you love them and they say they love you and you're gonna have a family and all this promising stuff. But then once it turns violent and once it like clicks into that role, it's like domestic violence but on steroids, right? Because of the shame that you're feeling due to the exploitation piece. It just amps it up 100 times more. Because we weren't designed to sell ourselves. Sex should never be called work. I don't care what anybody says. I'll say that to my dying breath. We just weren't created to do that. It just causes deep, deep, deep soul damage. And it takes many, many years to recover from that. And so whether a lot of the girls that we end up working with, or maybe even Steph ends up working with, they may not have a pimp at the moment, but they've gone through that exploitation. That soul damage is there. Someone's exploited them along the way, for sure. And so long story short, I'd be with my trafficker for over about 5 years or so. Very isolated from my family, my friends. Obviously, I never finished college to be a journalist. I didn't do drugs at the time of being trafficked. He kept me away from that kind of stuff. If anything, like when we went out partying, I drank and I would be inebriated because I had no coping skills. I was trying to just survive. Anything I could get my hands on, I did to an extent. I did everything to the extent. I had horrible coping skills. I had eating disorders, OCD-like type habits because my life was so out of control. I tried to control anything that I could. I washed myself constantly. Saw my primary care physician doctor all the time, self-diagnosing myself with all types of issues. Obviously, I was med seeking. Thank goodness, again, I never got addicted to anything because that makes it just so much harder and so much more of a barrier to exit. But after about 5 years of being with him, working all over New England in massage parlors, even down to Florida, was trafficked through Nevada, through the legal brothel system. That's a whole nother conversation. He had tons of other women working for him, lots of money, talked me into going to college to get a business degree so he can open a front as a business. And I did that, not wanting to go to, for business administration, hated it, but I did really well because I poured everything I could into it because I knew somewhere deep inside, he probably wasn't going to give me everything he promised, but at least I could get that degree and he couldn't take it away from me. And so I worked really hard at it. I tried to escape so many times. Every time I did, I would run back home to my parents' house. He'd come there and badger me, manipulate me, cry, promise he wouldn't hit me anymore. How can I say? It's kind of like people, that famous question, well, why didn't you just leave? And it's like, I wasn't handcuffed to a radiator, right? But I was in mental and emotional bondage. And that's the part that people who haven't been through this type of trauma don't understand. It's in the mind. And I believed the lie that I was going to be a no good, dirty prostitute for the rest of my life and that no one would love me. What is the one thing all humans need? Love. And at the end of the day, I wasn't a Christian, not obviously, but I was not. I didn't know, God was the one who was the creator of my soul and that he loved me. And I didn't know any of that information, right? But I believed I was unlovable, disgusting, and dirty. And that helped me, stay in that cycle for that long. But finally, after getting the degree, graduating, I ended up getting pregnant by my trafficker. And a lot of traffickers do impregnate their women on purpose to keep more control over them, which is even a whole nother conversation. But unfortunately, he forced me to terminate that pregnancy. And so there was a time in Massachusetts where you could no longer go to get an abortion. And I forget what it was now, but I was trying to hold on to the pregnancy till then, because I figured, okay, if I can just wait until that time, then I won't be able to do it and I'll be able to have the baby. And the baby will save my life and I'll be able to quit, and retire and have everything that he promised. And I was keeping track of all the money I was making. And to give you an idea, in 30 days, I made well over $20,000. Okay, so I barely make that a year as a missionary doing the work I do now. But imagine making that in a month and having all these other women working for him. And so I thought for sure I could retire and have everything he promised if I could just have that baby. But unfortunately, time was ticking and he kept pressuring me. I had to go, I had to call, make the appointment. And so I finally did, because I knew if I didn't, maybe something god awful would happen to me and it would be horrendous. And so I just did what I had to do. So again, another, coercion, force, did that, but that lit the fire inside me where I was like, you know what? You can use and abuse me all these years, but to make me take a life was just way more than I can handle. I gotta go. And so I started saving money without him noticing. Put it in little Ziploc bags and tie elastics around it, because then I hid it in my dirt and my potted plants because I knew he wouldn't look there. And I wanted to save a few $1,000s so when I was ready to go, I can get my own apartment, because every time I went and escaped, he'd find me. So this time I was determined. Never thought about calling the cops. Never thought I was even a domestic violence survivor or anything like that. Like, I'm surviving. I'm doing this on my own. I'm going to figure it out. And don't you know, by God's grace in my life, I think it was Steph who mentioned when a survivor or a victim's ready to leave the commercial sex trade, they need one safe, supportive person to reach out to, right? And by God's grace, I happened to meet a sex buyer. By this point, my trafficker was posting ads of me on Craigslist and other adult websites. So I was working all over New England, in and out of homes, businesses. The demand is obviously a whole nother uncomfortable conversation we can have. But I meet a guy and I went to his house, thought it would be a normal call. And he doesn't do anything, nothing sexual happens, and he pays me a lot of money to sit there and hang out. And then week after week, he would continue to call me and I'd go to his house, hang out and watch SpongeBob. Okay, really random and funny. But he owned a small business. And so when I was finally ready and I had enough money saved, I reached out to him and I said, hey, you don't really know me. You don't know my situation. Can you lie and say that I work for you? Because I need fake pay stubs. And he did. And that was how I was able to get my own place. And of course, I called the local police at that time and said, I'm wanting to move. My boyfriend's going to get mad. Can you come hang out on the porch? And the cops just stood on the porch. My trafficker was there and I left with 2 trash bags, right? Nothing. I left everything behind. And I had my cat and my dog, and I got into one of the cars that was in my name anyway. And I drove away to my new place. The cop didn't follow me. He didn't offer me any even domestic violence resources, nothing. And I'm lonely, I'm suicidal, I'm hopeless. I have no idea how I'm going to put this together. But I managed to call my mom, don't have the courage to tell her everything. She obviously knew I was in some kind of unhealthy relationship. She knew all the details, and I was too ashamed to talk about it. But she helped me buy some furniture, put it together. But don't you know, a few weeks go by and I panic and I call him back, right? Because relapse is a part of the process, trauma bonds, all these things. To speed up the story, obviously it doesn't work out. One night after a lot of violence and a lot of blood, I have the courage, I call 911, and he's arrested that night for domestic violence charges, which leads me to get a restraining order, which kept him away. A lot of pimps won't leave you, they don't care about a piece of paper, but this guy left me alone. And okay, I try to get a normal job in normal society, 9 to 5, falling asleep at the desk. I couldn't process. I couldn't even I was like a fish out of water, right? Like, how can I even function? Couldn't pay my bills. I started hanging out with new friends. They're all getting high. And this is when Oxycontin was real popular. And I started dibbling and dabbling, not realizing I'm going to have a full-blown drug addiction. I really just want all that pain to go away. I just want to forget about it. I want to die. I don't care. I get addicted to Oxycontin. Before I know it, I'm pushed back into the life of prostitution, not with a pimp, but with a growing drug habit, which is very, very common. And so, long story short, get addicted, heroin, homelessness, sleeping on park benches, more trauma, more abuse, prostitution, the whole thing. Years would go by, and finally got clean and sober in 2007. And someone introduced me to Christ, a woman who was known to take girls off the street to church. She took me to a Pentecostal church, and I've never been the same since. I met Christ in the backseat of a car. How appropriate, because Lord knows I've done a lot of unholy and horrible things, but that's who Christ is, right? He meets us where we're at, in our shame, in our muck and mire, and redeems us, and just took me on a journey. From there, found myself in a small non-denominational Christian church with loving, good people, men who are appropriate, didn't want anything from me, put my life together one day at a time, very slowly, made tons of mistakes, still do. But 5 years into it, was at a local meeting at a church. And who do I meet but Bonnie Gatchell from RouteOne Ministry, talking about the sex industry. And I had never told anyone my story because I was still too ashamed in the church, but still too ashamed. And she's using all my old language, pimps, prostitutes, drug addicts, strip clubs. And I had to raise my hand because I was on fire. So I had to let her know that I did that stuff and I want to help girls so they don't end up like me. And she called me a survivor, and everything changed. Started my own ministry, worked at My Life, My Choice for a while, worked at Amira, when all that anti-trafficking stuff was new, especially in New England. And I just wanted to reach out to the streets and tell women that there was a better way. And then if I can get off the streets, so can they. And that's how Bags of Hope originally started. And now here we are all these years later, turned it into Jasmine Grace Outreach, because again, we do so much more than the bags. We really walk alongside the women. And actually coming up this Sunday, we're celebrating 5 years of recovery for 3 of the women that we've walked alongside. So we're pumped to celebrate them. And that's my favorite thing, is watching these women go from, hopeless and in drug recovery, early drug recovery, hating life, and I run a group, the lights go on, they read my book, they realize they're survivors too. And then that sisterhood comes, and that just acceptance, and you watch them grow and share their story, and amazing things happen. So I love it.
Wow. Just thank you for sharing. And it's so powerful and inspiring. And I just really admire your strength and your courage in your story, and then in your willingness to share your story and to allow that to be something that draws other people in to doing what you do, and to be able to see themselves the way you now see yourselves, as a survivor. And that's just so beautiful and so powerful. Thank you. Yeah, and you started to hit on it a little bit. I just want to invite you to say a little bit more about Jasmine Grace Ministries. My experience with you guys is largely with Bags of Hope. I've done a bunch of Bags of Hope stuff and have heard a bunch of survivors come and share their stories with groups that I lead. And again, it's such a powerful experience and so important, and putting the bags together is so great. But so just, yeah, whatever you want to share about what you do, that would be great.
Yes, so it started off just giving the bags, having the community get involved, and it still to this day is one of our favorite things where people get together, whether it be their own private events, or I go to high schools, I go to middle schools, Girl Scouts, churches, wherever, and people do donation drives, and then we fill the bags together, write a little note card, let the ladies know that they are loved, there's a better way, and we give these bags out now over 1,000 bags a year. And they're all housed in my parents' basement in their house still to this day. We're not fancy. We just got everything, all our supplies there. And then from giving out the bags, I started running groups in halfway houses, started this curriculum through a book called Seeking Safety. If there's any therapists, they'll understand what seeking safety is, talks about boundaries, coping skills. And it's 8 to 10 weeks. And it's also talking about what prostitution, commercial sex trade, trafficking, all that information, a survivor story, some art therapy, good ways to cope, to journal, all that kind of stuff. We develop these relationships with the women. And then from there, usually a good majority of them have been exploited, but then from there, at least 2 or 3 maybe come out of that group and want more. So then we mentor. We walk alongside, provide services. We've also helped women get to safe homes across the country. A lot of women come out of jail or coming out of detox and need another place to go. And there's a lack of safe houses, a whole nother conversation to have in New England. So we help get them across the country to other safe houses. We've had some success with that. Just really filling in the gap, paying for airfare, paying for entry into a sober house, helping raise funds for one of the volunteers, one of the women that we work with, to get her license. All the wreckage of the past. She had almost $8,000 to pay the registry to get her license back. It was like insurmountable. So coming alongside of her and people who love us and support us helped raise the funds, and we matched half of it, and she was able to get her license and go from there. And yeah, they've written the book. And so a lot of women get the book for free because when we sell them at events, we ask for more for a donation, giving away well over 300 books to these women who are in situations or in jail. A lot of them in jail have the book. It just, listen, God has redeemed so much, and he is just constantly opening up doors. I've done so many speaking events at high schools, middle schools. That's my favorite, really educating and helping these young kids be aware, especially like Beth had mentioned about the online stuff. It's huge. These young kids think it's acceptable and okay until it's not. And so to be able to educate them is huge. And so I love that stuff.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, I want to ask just a couple general questions that, any of you guys can jump in and answer if you have something that speaks to it. The first one being, so if, our friends who are listening now, who are listening later, could walk away with 1 or 2 things from tonight that you would want them to know about your work, or, some of these educational things that you guys do that, like, this is what, when I'm out speaking or whatever, this is the one thing that I tell people. What would that, and again, don't get hung up on the one thing, but like, here's an important piece of my work, or it could be a resource that you're like, everyone needs to know about this. What would that 1 or 2 things be?
Okay, I'll hop in. Sometimes there's misconceptions about kind of the work that we do internationally, that we're kind of like a vigilante going in and rescuing people out of brothels and brick kilns and rice factories and things like that. And that is, we certainly do provide rescue for those, but more importantly, we are bridge builders. And we work in a context where, in a variety of places with government officials and with people that are not Christians, and in very, very difficult circumstances. In the online exploitation issues that we've been talking about, we just been working with Apple. We've been working with TikTok. And in terms of advocacy for them to pay attention to these sites and, to shut them down. Those are examples of kind of, what we want to do. We want to, broker these partnerships. And the thing that for IJM, as we move forward, we have over the last 24 years figured out the systems that work to strengthen these justice systems. We figured it out through a lot of trial and error. And now we are poising ourselves in this decade that we're in by 2030 to protect 500 million people because those justice systems are going to be strengthened around the world. And so in order to do that, that means we have to raise up partnerships from everywhere, and partnerships that are going to help us scale up our aftercare services, scale up our investigative capabilities, particularly in the online world. All these different things. So it requires a lot of advocacy. In fact, we have an advocacy training coming up this Saturday at noon Eastern time, where we are working on a project with the Central American Women and Children's Protection Act, and advocating that our government be able to resource that so that there are funds available for protection and strengthening those justice systems. So obviously resources are a big deal for us as well. So that's one thing. If you're interested in that, I know we'll have some information in the chat that you can go to our website and sign up for that. And the second thing, which is probably true for all of us, is that the only way that we are able to provide the services and really be transformative in an individual's life or in a country's life for survivors, for people that we hope never, ever get in this situation again, are financial resources and becoming a freedom partner with IJM, which is you provide a monthly gift. You hear what the prayer requests are from the different field offices that we're in, and you continue your education really on those issues that are related to trafficking. And even though I've talked about international trafficking, it definitely impacts the United States. There is a domestic connection, particularly when you look at the customer base for some of those hotspots in the world that are experiencing the trafficking. So it really is a global concern for all of us, and we are scaling. We are scaling for very broad protection around the world.
That's great. Thank you. And I will say IJM does such a great job of training for their advocacy. So if anyone, that information will be in the chat about that Saturday online stuff that I've done the in-person stuff with them in the past. And it's such a great opportunity to leverage the privilege we have as American citizens to tell our government, this is what we want you to do. We want to put our money and our power towards something really important. And they are really, if it sounds really intimidating to talk to your congressman or your senator, they're really great about giving you the tools to do that. And you never are doing it alone. You're doing it as part of a team. So I just want to throw that out there. Steph and Jasmine, if again, just to revisit the question, if there was one thing about the work that you do, or one resource, one fact or stat or something you wanted to kind of leave people with, this isn't our last question, but just kind of something you wanted to highlight, what would that be?
I guess for me, it's that the light of Christ cannot be dimmed or tainted. I think that a lot of us who grew up in church or in church now implicitly and explicitly receive kind of a negative theology that teaches us to focus on purity and holiness and to like stay away from dirtiness. And but I think that Jesus ate with sinners and prostitutes and called us to do the same. So I think we're called to go into these places and meet with these people who are children of God too, and who are not dirty, who are beautiful image bearers, and bring that light of Christ into those places. So just reinforcing that more positive theology, I think that God is stronger than any of that darkness. And that's what empowers us to be in those places. And then I just want to, of course, echo what Beth said, that we could not do the work we do without your financial partnership. And like Jasmine said, her trafficker made more money in 1 month than she makes all year. And that's, I can identify with that statement as well. So please consider partnering with us in that way.
Yeah, and I think I would just say the men, where are the men? We need the men to come alongside. I'm totally not a man hater. A lot of people like, wow, after everything you've been through, it's like, no, of course, like I didn't become a Christian to hate men. It's like I met a lot of great godly men along the way, and I'm inspired by the men that fight this fight, because sadly, the demand is largely men, right? So to counteract that, to have the men come and be the protectors and defenders that God created them to be is huge. We really need men in this movement. And there's a lot of ways to get involved. There's even some great books written about that, like having men find their voice in this movement. A lot of the events that I've gone to over the years are mostly filled with women, right? And they drag a few of their husbands in with them, like here and there. They're sprinkled throughout, but it's largely women. So when the men come and when they're involved and they're engaged and they want to partner, that's the best. And when they're on the front lines doing this work, it's just so great and so refreshing. So I just want to say that there is a place, and I hope that, there are men listening, or, to share this video with the men in your life and to have these uncomfortable conversations, because like Steph had mentioned about the pornography, that's rampant. And for Christian men in the church watching porn, not cool at all. If you want to be part of the problem, that's a great way to, just do that. But if you want to be part of the solution, definitely kicking porn and kicking that addiction, that sexual brokenness, bringing that to the cross, bringing that to small group or some men to help you stay accountable, whatever it is. But it's huge, and it's in the church, and it definitely needs to be talked about. Pastors talking from the pulpit is definitely needed. But I just want to encourage and let you know there's no shame, no condemnation, but to come alongside and get the healing that they may need is so important.
Wow, that's a lot of truth right there. I feel like we've come up with maybe 6 more uncomfortable conversations to do in this series. So I'm like set for the rest of the year. Thank you guys. But you've kind of all touched on this idea, and Jasmine, you specifically were saying there with men and kind of educating, like resources, books or whatever. But I guess that's a follow-up question I have is how do your organizations, or how have you seen other organizations, or what's going on out there in terms of education? Because I think Jasmine, maybe you mentioned in your testimony how there's been a lot of groundwork laid, and I've seen that too, like in the church, like where trafficking and anti-trafficking sort of became something. And again, I don't mean to like mock things when they become trendy. It's so important when people come alongside justice work, but it's like everybody comes along and then a core remains, right? Like there are people who, again, this does end up being their work, but so obviously there's been a groundwork laid for people understanding this issue. But I guess, so the question, as I'm getting to it, is what do your organizations do in terms of that education piece, and or what do you see being done that's good out there, I guess, that maybe you want to point people to? So either within or without your organizations, like how can we and should we continue to be educated on this issue?
I'll just jump in quick on that. I'm actually, as you guys were talking, I was thinking about the people that I work with, the donors and partners with IJM. I work with a lot of men, and they are, and they're Christian men for the most part. They are incredibly interested in being part of the solution, and many of them have their own children, and so it really resonates with them about protecting them. Our team, our leadership made a presentation actually at Promise Keepers in July when they had their big conference, and that was an exceptional opportunity to be able to present not just to them, but they broadcast globally. And so it was a huge audience. But even just to have that conversation about men's involvement, I'm delighted at the men that I work with who take this absolutely seriously and who have seen this as an issue that is for our time and for them. So I think we keep talking. Jasmine, you keep talking. Steph, you guys keep talking, because it's going to take time, but it's also going to take really demonstrating the courage that everybody has in order to be in this fight. And it is a fight. You guys are fighters, and it's just, yeah, I think the fight is not over at all, and we've got warriors in the wings coming in. So I'm encouraged, very encouraged by that.
Thank you. I see the resources you guys are putting in the chat, and I'm trying to also send them over to Facebook as well. Thank you. Steph or Jasmine, do you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I think just on the education piece, I work with a lot of fierce women who all kind of want to take over the world and fix all the world's problems. And somewhere along that road, we realized this is just too big for us, and we have to engage the community in order to effectively address this. So we do pastors training and training with other community leaders on what domestic trafficking looks like and what you can do about it. And like Jasmine said, a big reason that we do those pastors trainings is because it pulls out a lot of men, because we have majority male pastors. I'm always happy when there's female pastors involved too, but we want to engage the men, and that's a big way that we do that. So yeah, I think just engaging the community and letting people know that this is happening in your town. This is happening to women sitting in your pews. So you preach about it from the pulpit. You can do something. You're not helpless, and this is not a foreign issue to you. This is right here in your neighborhood.
Great, thank you. Jasmine, do you want to add anything to that question, or you had sent that resource, so we're including that, but.
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, I just want to wrap us up and just ask if there's anything final that you guys want to share. We've shared, links to your organizations. Jasmine, do you just want to share about that event especially? And then if you guys also have any final ways to connect, but Jasmine, go ahead.
Yeah, speaking about financially supporting, obviously it's really helpful. We have one big fundraiser a year, and usually it's in November, but this time we've changed it to January. So it'll actually be next year in honor of National Human Trafficking Awareness Month. It'll be January 15th, our annual Bring an Item, Fill a Bag event. It will be at Trinity Evangelical Church in North Reading. You can find it on our Facebook page and our website. There's nothing posted yet. But we're in the process. I just wanted to put that out there because everyone who comes, brings some donations. We have giant bins all filled with donations, and this whole bunch of us, and we go around, we fill bags. The most bags we filled last year in pandemic mode, we had a smaller event and we filled 400 bags. So it was amazing. People that didn't want to come out to this little event did it in their homes, and then they brought the bags to us. Again, good way to get schools involved, raise the awareness, talk about it, do donation drives, and get the word out there, and do the donation and bring the items, hear from survivors, and just have a great time. So that's January 15th.
Okay. Thank you. Steph and Beth, any last ways you guys want to just highlight to connect? Like I said, we have your websites in the chat, but anything else you want to add?
Just to say that we do have the advocacy training coming up this Saturday, and really anybody is welcome to join in on that. If you would personally like to take a deeper dive into the work of International Justice Mission, I would be happy to have that individual conversation with you. Elizabeth has my contact information, so you can reach out maybe to Elizabeth and who can let me
Yeah.
know. But I would be happy to have a one-on-one conversation.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, if you'd like to partner with RouteOne anyway, financially or through volunteering, please feel free to email me directly. My email is steph@lovedbyrouteone.org. What we have coming up is at Christmas, we do a special event where we bring more gifts to more clubs than we usually are inside. We put together these baskets that are filled with fun, cute, girly items. And we deliver them on Christmas Eve because the clubs are open on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So we're looking for churches to partner with us in that, in building the baskets and donating the items to them. And we're also we've found the best way to organize things for our budget is to have donors who are willing to do matching grants. So we're currently looking for a donor who's willing to do that. So if that's something that speaks to you, again, please email me.
Okay, thank you. And if anyone, has any questions or wants to like mediate through me, as Beth said, I'm happy to answer questions with what I know about these organizations and further connect you or do whatever I can to further a relationship with these amazing organizations doing such good work. I just want to thank you guys again for being here, for sharing your work, your stories, your passion, your knowledge, and just drawing us a little bit closer to the people that you serve and allowing us to see ways that we can be part of that amazing work. That's just such a gift. And it's the mission of our organization is just about these connections, so much about just connecting to this kind of amazing work and allowing our community to see the ways in which they can use the gifts that they were made with and the resources that they've been blessed with to further these works. I just want to say a quick word about some things that we have coming up. We just have 2 small groups that we have coming up. This week, we're starting a Lazarus at the Gate small group, which is our resource that helps us see how we can live and more simply, generously, and justly. And so that's this week. And November 1st, we're starting Color of Compromise. So we're kind of trying to figure out how to pursue issues of racial justice together. And that is an amazing book by Jamar Tisby. If you can't join our group, I still want to encourage literally every Christian to read that book. It's just really an important way to understand the history and complicity of racial injustice in the US and in the church. So that's just a quick plug for that book. But also, if you want to unpack it in community, please join us. These groups, you can just sign up and just participate with us. So anyway, that's just like a one breath discussion of BFJN. And let me just reiterate my thank you to you guys. It's just wonderful to be in community with you for a night and just be able to hear your stories. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your evening. And I hope to find other opportunities to share in your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.